Hey everybody, welcome back to another JBoz gaming video. This is your host, JBoz. And today I'd like to talk about secrets of a super duper unicorn. It's a little bit of a joke because it really involves a stat called WN8. I refer to it as Win8, so I'll interchange through the video probably what I'm saying it is, but it's WN8 is the actual stat. And this stat is something that's completely calculated by a third party. We'll get into what it is and what it isn't, and we'll even get into the detail of how it's calculated and what the different levels of it are and all of that. I'll give you the skinny. But I've been wanting to do this video for a while because there's a couple of things that I'm trying to address by doing this video. One, as always, sharing with you guys as much information as possible about what's going on in the world of tanks. And a lot of times this stat is used by many in the community to what I consider bully others. And what I mean by that is they use this stat to compare maybe themselves to maybe your score, even though you don't even know what it is or even know what your score is. And it's just not appropriate. And so we're going to kind of get into that. Also, I did a search on YouTube for other videos that talked about WN8, and though there were 4 and they explained what it was, they certainly didn't explain what it was not, how it's being abused, and how to kind of come back at that or restrict that. And then also they didn't really address actually how it was calculated and how you can improve it if you are so inclined. So let's get into all things WN8. I'll also explain what I mean by super duper unicorn secrets right out of the gate. This stat is a bit of a fictional stat because it's supposed to represent something that it probably really doesn't. And so that's why I kind of make fun of it, because I've changed the terms that the stat uses to classify people, especially the terms unicom and super unicom. I've changed those to unicorn and super duper unicorn. So you've probably seen in a lot of other videos that I do where I'm making fun of those people that are unicom or super unicom. And so therefore, I'm making fun of myself. And that's okay, because I know what the stat means. I don't use it to berate other people. I might use it to inform other people about what it does mean and so on, but I don't use it to really, decide who gets in or is not in my clan. I do not look down on people that don't have a great WN8. Let's dive in. Let's get started. I think we've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to walk into the detail, but I get that a lot of people are not math experts and probably will maybe doze away as we get into the actual formula. And that's okay, guys. If you aren't interested in the actual formula or how to improve the stat, totally fine. But I appreciate you at least listening to the video to see or hear what WN8 is, where it comes from, and what it is not. So yeah, let's get into it. So let's start with what WN8 is supposed to be. Like I said, it is calculated by a third-party group that maintains this stat, or at least the formula for it, and also maintains the database of expected tank values, and I'll explain that in a minute. But it really, all of the data for the calculation of the stat comes from a public API, which stands for Application Programming Interface, that Wargaming has and is available. And that's how you get these other websites that are showing people information about their account and their tanks. So they use Wargaming's public programming interface to collect data. So in this API, Wargaming is pumping out data, right? Different data values for all the battles and tanks that are played. Third parties come along and collect this data and then start doing data analysis and then creating websites and so on And today I'm going to refer to a website called World of Tanks Stars, but it's initial WOTSTARS.com. And that has statistics. It's a really cool website. If you don't use it, I certainly recommend it. But it also has where you can see the expected values for the tanks, not just your actual values, but expected values. Let's step back. Let's talk about WN8. So WN8 seeks to measure the observable contribution to matches across an account and hopefully infers some information about the latent variable known as skill. So this is a fancy way of saying that through statistics, they're trying to infer how skillful someone is at playing World of Tanks. Okay, that's what this is trying to do. But what WN8 is not, and it should not be considered the end-all, be-all of skill evaluation. It is intended to be looked at next to, or along with, things like win rate, battle count, average tier, and should never be considered a replacement for really an inspection of the service record or platooning with someone or watching their replays. This is because WN8 or WN8 cannot capture things like map awareness, timing, manual shooting, target priority. I refer to this as threat progression, teamwork, decision-making abilities. So it doesn't have any of that in there. It has some very simple statistics that, yes, you can initially try to infer some kind of skill in World of Tanks. So it's a very basic measure of skill at best. So, but it is certainly not the main, or should never be used as the main determination of skill, because it doesn't factor in all of these things like map awareness, timing, manual shooting, and so on, right? It doesn't include any of that stuff. So you might have a particular score in the WN8 stat, but you actually might be a much more skilled player than the stat infers, because you're doing all these things that the stat doesn't even track, and you're having success. Let's kind of, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share kind of a little chart that I have so that you all can see this. This is the kind of ranking system that WN8 provides us. If you have a WN8 of anywhere above 2900, you're considered purple or super unicom. And I refer to these people as super duper unicorn because they really think they're special, and they're not. So some of these people are actually really good, and I don't refute that. But some of these people are good players. They're just not some of the best in the game. And this is what this is supposed to imply. You're one of the best in the game. So let's talk about the additional levels. So, and it just kind of goes down from there. If you have a stat of anywhere above 2450, but you're below 2900, then you're considered unicom. In my case, I consider you a unicorn. And then if you're below the 2450, but haven't dropped, the stat is somewhere between 2000 and 2500, then you're considered great. 1600 to 2000 is very good. And then 1200 to 1600 is good. 900 to 1200 is above average. 650 to 900 is average. And then 450 to 650 is below average. And then 300 to 450 is bad. And then if you have a score of 0 to 300, you're considered, at least via the WN8 score, a very bad player. So let's talk about how people potentially misrepresent or cheat, if you will, at this stat. The first thing that people tend to do is when you start your World of Tanks career, you are not necessarily good at the game for several reasons. One, you're learning the rules, you're learning the mechanics, you're learning how to control your tank. I mean, you're just learning a lot at the beginning, right? And so no one would expect you to be super unicom, or in my case, super duper unicorn. you're going to be on the lower end of this spectrum because you don't even have the information. So as I've said in other videos, World of Tanks has a huge learning curve. And some people pick up and learn it very quickly because they have a mentor. They found my YouTube video or somebody else's YouTube video that helps them gain knowledge. And they've learned more than the other people that are just literally learning it on their own and trying to figure it out. And so that learning curve can be different for different folks, but it is steep nonetheless, meaning that you take a long time to learn all there is to know about World of Tanks. One, there's a lot to know. Two, it is not easy or apparent or readily available for you to know this when you start World of Tanks. Wargaming is very bad at bringing in new players and introducing them to their game and showing them all the rules, mechanics, and how-tos, if you will, of how to be successful in the game. And so that means that a new player takes a long time to ramp up and get any good at World of Tanks, regardless of how good. So a lot of people go through this period and they find out about this WN8 and they may think that it represents something that it does not, which we shared earlier, and they want to have a real high WN8, or at least higher than what they have. So the first thing they do is they no longer play their original account, they just create a new one. And they start playing that new account. Well, as you can imagine, if you don't have the history of learning and growing as a tanker on your account, well, then you immediately become, maybe above average or good because you're being compared against tankers that still have that history on their account, right? So this is the first way that people kind of cheat and start a new account and have raise their WN8 considerably because they drop what I'll call bad history. It's not really bad history. It's great history. It's accurate history, right? It's how you learn and how quickly you learn to play World of Tanks. It doesn't matter today if you're evaluating your skill, but it's still calculated in as your overall service record. People kind of eliminate that, and that's how they fake, if you will, a WN8. The other way that people kind of misrepresent or cheat on a Win 8 is actually playing a single tank that they're really good at, more than 50% of all their battles on their account. Now, it's not wrong if you want to do this or if you've done this. That's okay. You enjoy playing that tank, and there's nothing wrong with you playing only that tank. But what it does do is it does break the WN8 formula and misrepresents overall how good you might be because it's trying to evaluate overall your account, which includes all your tanks, and there's no data for those, so it only takes the tank that you've played, and it'll represent kind of that tank and that tank's score for your overall account, which you may be super great at that tank, but you're maybe not good at any of the other tanks because you clearly haven't played them if you've played on this tank 50% of your battle. Again, totally okay to do this. There's nothing wrong with that. Just know that that's a situation where people could be looking like they have a super great WN8, and in fact, they have it on a particular tank, which is accurate for that tank, but it means that the WN8 is not accurate for their account. Be aware that this is how this stat is misrepresented. Not sometimes intentionally, because I know a lot of people that love whatever tank they play, and that's what they play. And that's okay. They should be able to do that. They should be able to play any way they want to play. The third way that people cheat or misrepresent, and I'm using the word cheat very loosely here, because again, this is not even a stat that I don't even know if Wargaming supports or cares whether this stat exists out there. But people use it, and so that's why I'm making you aware of it. Having other players play on the account that are better than themselves. Now, sometimes this is done purposefully. Sometimes this is not done purposefully. For example, I had met an individual that was playing, and it looked like they had a really good WN8. I think they were Unicorn or something like that. They were in the Unicom area. And I was playing with it. I'm like, wow, this guy doesn't seem to be as good as his stats indicate. And And again, I don't judge people on their stat. I judge people on how they play. And I was just noticing that he's not playing at that level. And so I asked him, I said, it looks like you have a real good stat. And for a while they wouldn't tell me, but eventually they admitted that this was an account that was an older brother's account, and now they're playing on the account and continuing to play World of Tanks on the same account. Some families might share an account, and then you have, maybe somebody that's really good and somebody that's not so good, and so they're misrepresented because they're playing on the same account, and the WN8 might reflect another player's scores. So again, it is not the be-all, end-all of a particular player's skill. So let's now take a breath, kind of absorb all of this, and talk about how this actually is calculated. Like I mentioned, there is a formula, and I'm going to share that formula with you, and we're going to go through that in detail. Again, you don't have to watch all of the detail if you're not interested in how to improve your WN8. But at this point, I just want to kind of make sure that you understand that there are people out there that use this stat, and where you can find this stat and how you can see your own score reflected. And so let me at least bring up a website where we can look at this. So here's the website I was referring to. It's WOTstars.com. WOTstars.com. And on this web page, you can put in your player name. 303, there I am, I pick me, and on here it gives you just a ton of information and stats, right? But notice there's always this WN8 appearing, right? It's always, here it is over here in the 30, 60, 90 day, on and on and on, right? This is where people is getting this stat is in third-party websites. You will not find this stat on the World of Tanks official website. You will not find this stat on the console stats page in the game. It doesn't exist as far as wargaming is concerned, but this is derived. So for this website, they read in the API and then calculate this for every player that plays the game. And so on this website, you can easily see your Win8. This is your WN8 broken down by tier. So, you can kind of see, and right now it's set to 30 days, but I always go to all time because maybe people are really playing well of late. So if you want to know, hey, historically, how have they played? What is that account overall? You always want to look at the all-time because it's going to always be lower because, again, it's factoring in that history, right, of how long it took to learn the game, how long it took to progress. So when you click on that 30 days, you can see a more accurate picture of a particular person's account. Again, this still does not tell you truly how skilled a single player is. Mine, if you want my honest opinion, my current score still does not reflect the skill at which I play the game because I don't particularly care about this stat. But in order to prove a point to my clan, I started improving it so to kind of expose what this is and what this isn't. And I'll get into that in a minute. But my score is a little low, probably for how good I actually am at the game. But that's okay. It will eventually get there because now I am improving this stat so that it will reflect basically where I'm at in the game. And the reason it doesn't is I didn't even start working on WN8 until I was well past 40,000 battles. And obviously that's a lot of history of the game and doing things, quote, wrong, if you will, based on the actual stat and how it's calculated. When you listen further into this video and I start telling you how to improve WN8, there's certain things you can do to get a better score, and that when you start to take that into consideration and play more that way, and I don't mean changing your play, but really the tanks you play and so on, we'll get into that. But that's where you can actually start to increase this score pretty easily and pretty greatly. Even though I am purple, super duper unicorn, it's probably a little low. I'm probably between a 3,500 and 4,000. And you can probably see that. Because, so if you go here and you kind of see the 30 days, 60 day, 90 days, the more current is probably the more accurate for me. For other people, they could have just had a good game one night, and they only play like 3 times a month, and it's just, it is what it is, right? So that's where Win8 is found. That's what Win8 is and what Win8 isn't. We're going to get into the actual looking at the formula and how it's calculated here in just a moment. So I'll be right back. All right, let's now dive into how the WN8 is actually calculated. Actually, the formula is quite simple, though. When you see it, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I don't even know what this means, and so on. But there's kind of 3 steps that happen before you even plug in the data into the actual formula. And so I want to talk about those steps, because knowing these steps, though you may not care about the actual formula, knowing these steps, at least the first one, will help you do better, or help you focus on how to improve your WN8. Or the first step is it takes your actual values and divides by the expected value. So every tank that you play has actual results, right? You do a certain amount of damage, you spot a certain number of tanks, you kill a certain number of tanks, right? And so those are the actual values. But there's actually a list of tanks, and they have expected values. So these expected values are made up of millions of battles, hundreds of thousands of players, and it's basically averaged out where it's an average of what other people are doing in that particular tank. So the first step in the formula, or the first step before you use the formula, is they determine your actual values and divide that actual value by the expected value. So let's take a look again at World of Tank Stars, and let me share with you where you can find these things. So if you go to worldoftankstars.com and you go to tanks, this is the database, if you will, of tanks that have expected values. So I'm going to look up German tanks, tier 4. Let's just filter it down so we can just see some tanks, okay? So here's a 3J. That's a pretty common tank that people play. So let's start with the 3J. The 3J is a medium tank. It's a tier 4 tank, and here's the number of battles that people have played in the last day, I think, with it. No, I don't know what, this is an average, the number of battles per day, I think. So the win rate, the average win rate in a 3J is 50.64%. So that would be the average win rate, or expected win rate, that they would use when they're dividing your win rate, your actual win rate. And we'll get into this in a minute. So, but I want to draw your attention to the damage. The damage is 291. So this is the average damage done in 3Js over almost 700,000 battles, right? So this is the average, and this is the expected value to be average, right? So if you do better than this, then your WN8 is going to be higher than average. If you do worse than this, then it's going to be below average. So that's what it means by expected values. What I mean by that is this table here per tank. It will give you the expected value. So here's number of kills. The formula refers to that as frags, but it means the same thing. So 0.91 is the average. So about 1 kill a battle should be the expected kill rate for the average tanker. And then spots is 1.62, right? And then, like we said, the win rate is here. Okay, and so pretty straightforward. This is the table where you can find those expected values. So if you're playing a particular tank and you want to know, hey, what do I need to do to perform well in this tank? Look it up on this table and go over and kind of look at what the expected values are. And if you accomplish that, then you can expect that your win rate, your WN8, will be pretty good. and so on. In fact, later on when I talk about the strategy to really improve your WN8 is you'll be coming in here trying to decide what you're going to play. Because you'll want to pick tanks that have lower expected values that you perform well in order to improve your WN8. Let's go back and let's talk about the other steps before we actually calculate the formula. So step 2 is we take your actual results from the battle and compare them to the expected value, determining the difference that will be used in the formula. Okay, so this is just kind of the difference that happens in the actual formula. So this is again just taking what's the actual values and divided it by the expected values. Step 3, they consider this step a normalizing step. They could put mins and maxes because this is a difference. The step 2 is a difference between the two values. You can have a huge range, right? So they try to reduce that range so that it fits within the scoring system of the WN8. So they just use min and max functions to do this. And so it's fairly straightforward. It maxes, if you will. You determine the max number between two values or the minimum number between two values. And usually it's your calculated difference versus a constant in the formula. So step 4, we literally plug in all the normalized values into the formula. And again, I'm going to walk through this in detail. If you're really wanting to see how this is calculated, that's okay. We'll get there. But there's some key things that you can take away if you don't care about the formula specifically, but you really want to know how it works, right? When we talk about WN8, there are some things that are included in the formula. So here is the formula. It is WN8 equals 980, which is just a constant, I call it a factor, times this variable, which is damage, normalized, plus 210 factor times the normalized damage times the normalized frags or kills, okay? Plus 155 times the number of kills times the number of spots, plus 75 factor times defensive points, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, normalized defensive points, times the number of frags or kills, plus 145 factor times the minimum, so whichever's less, 1.8 or the normalized win percentage. So usually it's your actual win percentage. So that's the formula. Even though I know these variables look scary, we're going to get into what makes up these variables and how each one of these variables are calculated. But what I want to point out is these factors, right? This 980, this 210, this 155, this 145, and this 75. If you look at this, the larger factor has more of an impact on the calculation than the lower factor. Even though there are two numbers being multiplied here, these numbers generally are very small numbers, okay? So these factors are huge in the weighting of the formula. And so when you look at damage, or when you look at the two things that have the largest factor, the 980 and the 210, both of these include damage. Do you see that? Damage and damage. So that means damage is the core. It is the biggest factor in what determines your WN8. It's about damage, folks. It does include other things like the kills and the spots and the defensive points, and win rate. But those all together don't even add up to what these two first factors are. So it is huge to understand the expected value in a tank as far as its damage, which again, when we were looking at the 3J, remember that was 291? So if you do better than that, then these factors really kick in. So if you do damage of 400, 500, say 1,000 in your 3J, now you've got a huge win 8 because that is the weighted factors is damage. The formula includes damage, frags, spots, defensive points, and win rate. So what are each one of these things? You know what direct damage is. It's the amount of damage you do to other tanks in a battle. The frags are the actual just kills, the tanks, number of tanks you destroyed. And spots are how many tanks you've spotted. It is not any kind of assist damage. Okay, and I'll get to that in just a minute. It also includes defensive points. And what are defensive points? Well, defensive points are where someone's capping on your cap circle and trying to win the game. And you come and you reset the cap. You shoot them and do damage to them. That's defensive points. And what it was found as they kind of went through and done analysis on the data, it was determined that cap points, when you're actually sitting and trying to capture the flag on an opposing base, has no bearing on the actual win rate of a game, which I thought was kind of neat because the data shows that it just doesn't apply. But winning the game and being able to remove people from your cap has more of an impact on success when it comes to high-performing players and success of winning matches. And of course, win rate is just that. It's the amount of times that you've played versus the amount of times that you've won, right? Well, it's division. The number of wins that you actually have versus the number of times you played is your win rate. So very straightforward, very simple. Now, let's talk about assisted damage. Assisted damage comes in two forms. It comes in assisted spotting damage, where you've spotted someone and one of your allies is shot them or done damage to them. That's assisted damage. That is, you can see that on the scoreboard at the end of the match. And then there's the other way to get assisted damage is if you track someone and that tank's tracked. While he's tracked, another teammate of yours shoots that tank and does damage to it, then you get track damage, right? Assisted track damage. Both of those assisted damage are not included in the WN8. And it's not because they don't want to include these, it's simply not available in the API. Meaning Wargaming doesn't pump those particular values out in the public consumption of the API. So it's not even available for them to use. So that's why assisted damage is not included here. So if you're a super great light tank player and you're doing a good job, getting out there, doing some damage, also doing some assisted damage, your assisted damage is not even calculated or even used in the WN8 score. Again, showing you this is not the end-all be-all to determining whether that player's skilled and is highly contributing to winning battles. There's issues with it, and this is one of them, is that assisted damage is not even in the formula. It's not even included in the formula. It's direct damage. So the WN8 is calculated at the tank level. So that means that each tank, there's a WN8 score that's calculated. In fact, it's even calculated per battle by tank. And then obviously over time, it accumulates into across tanks, across the account. So WN8 is at every level and is calculated at every level that it can be calculated. C is cap points were not found to be statistically correlated with winning, like I said. People unfamiliar with the formula often accuse unicoms, or unicorns, of being red line snipers, meaning sitting back and just doing nothing but shooting people and damaging people. However, the WN8 authors noted the following. So spots and kills appear to measure something important for winning. These interactions seem to be properly measuring players that can do multiple things and adapt to what needs to be done to win, as opposed to players who play absolutely safe and simply deal out damage only. So players, per player analysis indicated that the kills and spots can tell you a lot about how much a player actually manages to win. The authors believe it has to do with the aggressiveness and willingness to create opportunities for the team. This is what I want to key on. I did a video called, I think I called it Controlled Aggression. I at least talk in the video about controlled aggression, and good players do this. They don't sit back. They might initially, but when they can isolate someone, they get hyper aggressive and they take that tank out. They bleed it of all its damage, and then they usually take the tank out. So good players pick their spots, folks. They don't just YOLO out They don't just, go anywhere and get a massive amount of damage and just react. They actually pick the opportunities, and when their opportunities present themselves, they know what to do and how to take advantage of that opportunity, and they actually get pretty aggressive when that occurs. And so it's about finding that sweet spot of controlled aggression that I talk about in another video of mine. And the formula actually proves that out, that people that are doing this are truly performing better, generally, statistically, than other people when it comes to the WN8 score. Again, it doesn't tell you that they're better at someone else doing this, but it at least does reflect that in the formula. So that's good. So yeah, so the last little bullet here is people often ask why assisted damage is not included in WN8. And one reason is that it is not available per tank level in the WOT API. Like I said, it's just not available, guys, for them to use. That's how, and with some nuances, that's how the WN8 stat is determined. So, in order to make this make more sense, let's talk about exactly how it's calculated. So they break down, or I've broken down each step. So in each step, this is what actually happens in order to calculate the win rate. So the first step is, again, determining that expected values like damage, spotting, kills, defensive points, and the win rate. These are all determined by that World of Tanks tank tab, or tanks tab. If you go out there and just plug these numbers in, and then you take a particular, let's say your average for your tank, and you plug these in over here, then you're going to get these variables, the values of these variables. R damage. So R damage is just a raw calculation between your actual damage divided by your expected damage. That is a raw number, right? It is not normalized yet. That's in step 2, where we normalize. So let's hop down there and let's take a look at normalized damage. So we take the raw damage, which was calculated up here, and we subtract a 0.22. Again, this is a constant. It's a value that they've determined is appropriate and keeps the range so that it's spread out across the different skills. And I don't want to go into that because it's about analytics and analysis, and it'll bore you to death. But this is just a constant that is basically reversed, 1 minus the constant, so that you get a ratio of value. And then it takes the max. If this is below 0, it will take 0. If it's above 0, it will take this actual calculated value. That's all that means. So you're just normalizing within a specific range what this ratio should be. And that's what you get if you look at this variable. It's R damage C. This is the value that is used in the actual formula for win rate. If you look down here, here's the actual formula, and it is R damage C, and that is what is actually used when you multiply the factor of 980. Okay, so that's just stepping through one. You do that for all, 5 different stats? 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 different values. You do that for each one of those, and you end up getting these variables here filled out. You plug those variables into this formula, and that is your win rate score. Let me hop over, because I just took an Excel spreadsheet and I plugged in these formulas for you. So here is, and I'm just trying to show you that this value is divided by that value. So here's the expected, and I actually did this on a 3J. Good, I'm glad. So here we did a 3J. Here's an actual result I had in a 3J, and here's the expected result values. Like 291 was damage, I did 704. The expected spot was 1.62, I only did 1. But kills, I had 2.5 versus the 0.91. Defensive points was 0. You can't really, there's nowhere where you, unless you go into the API and look for that particular tank, there's no way for you to see the defensive points and how they, how you did. You might know that you shot the cap and shot a tank on the cap, but you don't really know what the defensive points are. So that's why it's a little hard for you to, unless you're going into the API and getting the actual values, it's a little hard for you to just do this manually. The win rate you can put in, I actually lost that match, so it was 0. But if I had won the match, it would have been 100%. This is the expected values for both of those. And that's why your win A, if you manually calculate, it's always going to be a little bit off, because if you did do defensive points, you don't know what those were unless you're actually looking at the API. So this is a little hard to do manually, but I'm trying to show you how it works here, right? So when we do this, here's what we get for our damage. We did this divided by that, and this is the actual value, right, that we get, 2.419. See how it's a small ratio? And that's why when they start to normalize these things, if you come down here, here's where it's doing this formula. It actually comes up with the 2.819 because that was the max number. It's greater than 0. It also took in the ratio and figured out, hey, this is the constant, and we want to be around that constant, so we'll normalize it. And that's what they do with this little bit of a formula here. So basically the factor that is used is 8.19544, which is what comes down here, which is multiplied by 980, which results in right here. So F18, which is right here, is what's used down here to multiply by 980. And that's why you get 2,763. Notice that the damage is the largest piece of the total win 8. This win 8 comes out to be 4,700 for this particular tank for this match. So that damage I did is the biggest factor. Look at that. And we can play around with these values. Let's say I did 1,000 damage, right? And that's why I did the spreadsheet. Look at the win 8. It jumps to 6,800, right? Let's say I did less than average. Let's say I did 200. What happened? Oh, wow. Look at the win 8. It dropped to 735. And so if we go back and look at our little chart, go back to our little chart here. Let's scroll up. Look at 735. It's below, it's average actually. So I've got more than average kills, so that probably helped me keep myself in the average range. But it really dropped. But notice the first time around, I was well over Super Unicom because it was like 4,000, right? Let's go back. This was like 704, I think I did. Yeah, so wow, that's definitely Super Unicom. The 4,000 is well above 2,900. And so this kind of proves to you by using the formulas that there are values that matter more than other values. So let's say I had 8 spots, right? It definitely increases the win 8, but not as much as damage does. Let's go down to 7. See, it didn't come down. Let's go down to 6. It didn't come down because there is a range of spots. They're considering, well, if you did more than X, then we're only going to give you so much credit for doing so much more. So let's go down to 4. See if that, no, still doesn't change. Let's go 3. So 3, somewhere between 3 and 4 is the max range that it gives you. I think 4 is where it caps out for this particular tank, be based on what its expectations are. The normalization formula for spotting keeps it within a range. Again, you don't have to know exactly what it is that maximizes out, because you just can't control it that finitely. Oh, I've only spotted 4, so I don't care about spotting anymore. You're just playing the battle. Don't think too much about it. But just know that damage matters the most, and certainly that these other factors are involved. So yeah, so that's the idea here, is to be able to show you that this formula works. It does calculate win 8, that those factors do matter more. And so when we see those factors, that's the important thing. So when we're coming up with an overall strategy, let's go back and let's talk about tips for improving your win 8. Let's get down here. Damage is the most important factor for your win 8. But it's the expected damage that makes the difference. Thus, play tanks that have lower expected damage and then maximize the damage in the tank that you're playing per tier. So pick a tank that you're good at. Look at the expected value for that tank, and if you usually do more than that value, then you're always going to have generally a good win 8, which will improve your overall win 8 on your account over a number of battles. And so that's how you can improve your W in 8. Second tip, stop playing premium tanks, as they usually are tanks with the highest expected damage. So I have an example for you, and I'll share that in a minute. But the reason that premium tanks have a higher expected value is because when you start playing tech tree tanks, they aren't fully upgraded. You have to get up to the last upgrade before that tank seems like it's worth playing. What happens is a lot of people grind the tech tree, which is totally normal and right to do, but they're having less than stellar games in these tech tree tanks, which is all included in the average. And as a result, the overall average for those tech tree tanks are a lot lower, so therefore the expected value is a lot lower in the tech tree tanks than in premium tanks. Because in premium tanks, you already have the best equipment you can have on that tank. So it's already kind of maximized, if you will. That's the point of premium tanks. You're basically starting at the top with that tank. And that's why the average games in premium tanks usually result in higher averages across the player base. Therefore, it's harder for you to score that much over the average. So it's better to play tech tree tanks that have been completely upgraded, and therefore you're constantly scoring over the average for that particular tank. So a lot of people, what they do is they go in, they start grinding the tech tree, and they have free XP, and the first thing they do is upgrade that tank to as far as they can get it. They upgrade it to, if they can get it all the way upgraded, then they do that. And then they start playing the tank. That keeps their win 8 maximized as they're grinding up the tech tree tanks. Kind of know that there are certain tanks that people, there's a difference between the tech tree tanks and the premium tanks, and you want to play tech tree tanks over premium tanks. So what I did when I wanted to prove a point to my clan about this stat and what it was and what it wasn't, the only thing that I changed, I didn't change my gameplay, I didn't change anything that I was doing on the battlefield. I changed something in the garage. I stopped playing any premium tanks. I would only play tech tree tanks. And I went from, like I said, the blue area, the 2000 to whatever it was, and I went right up to Super Unicom scores immediately. Because prior to that, I had been playing my premium tanks. I played whatever tank I enjoyed playing, and I would play a mix of tanks. I'd play tech tree tanks, I'd play premium tanks. So I had a mix. And that was keeping my win 8 down because I was probably getting into those premium tanks, maybe scoring a little above average, but not much above average. And so my win 8 was not Super Unicom. And so this is one step. This is the first step you can make, is to completely eliminate playing your premium tanks for a while, or whatever you want to do. If you want to improve this particular stat, this will do it. This will help you get there. So that's the first step, and that's my example. Is I went overnight from a great player to a Super Unicom player. My clan had no idea. Just eliminated playing premium tanks, and I'd only play tech tree tanks with them. And they still saw me doing the same things. They still saw me being the same player. But the change was I just stopped playing premium tanks. And probably in about a year and a half, I converted an account that had about 40,000 battles at the great level into a 50,000 plus now, I think. Around that 50,000 plus battles, a Super Unicom stat, and that's still going up. Like I said, it's I think my win 8, my WN 8 is a little low compared to the actual level that I am as a player. Now I'm not the best out there, guys. I wouldn't even claim that. There's people they're certainly better than me at World of Tanks. But I'm a pretty damn good player, and that's the most this win 8 can reflect. Let's go to the third point. Play tech tree tanks that can perform well in every battle and have the lowest expected damage. But try to max out your upgrades if you can before you start to play the tech tree tanks. Now, the other tip that I can share with you is play in maxed out platoons. So today, the max number of players that can be in a platoon is 3. And so try to play most of your battles in a platoon with 3 people. Now, the reason that is helpful is generally that if you're playing with other pretty decent players or just better players, then that's going to help your win rate. And your win rate is part of your WN8, so it will help you improve your WN8. So platoon when you can, and always try to platoon with as many people as you can. In summary, the WN8 is about having more damage than the expected specific tank that you're playing. Win8 doesn't include assisted damage, so just know your spotting and tracking a damage doesn't help your WN8. It's still very good to have, folks, and it is an indication that you are a skilled player if you're doing a lot of that. Don't let people bully you about your WN8 score, because some of the great things you're doing aren't even calculated in the stat. And then the WN8, there are ways that people try to manipulate that score, which we talked about earlier in the video. And of course, just to remember, the WN8 does not indicate who is the best player. It generally indicates whether someone has some skill or proficiency in a tank, especially when you want to distinguish whether they're a below average or above average player. But it does not replace, and will never replace, you actually watching someone play and seeing if they play at a great player level. Just as a bonus, there is a stat that Wargaming does use called personal rating. And this personal rating, I don't know, I've been asked about this. It's a formula based on certain stats, and here it is. I'm going to give it to you. This personal rating is a scale created by wargaming.net to evaluate player performance. The rating system accounts for a variety of statistics such as battle counts, wins, damage, survivals, as well as numerous other factors. As you can see, it's even a more complex formula than the WN8. However, even though it's got more values and is even includes assisted damage in it, both assisted spotting damage as well as assisted tracking damage, it is still not a rating that people can use to compare one skill to another's skill. Again, there's no statistic that is going to look at map awareness or a player's ability to threat assess or how aggressive they are. There's no statistic that's going to do that. You got to watch a replay. You got to play games with these people to evaluate them in that sense. So though this is interesting, and people ask me about this personal rating, this rating is not even considered as good as WN8. Even though WN8 actually is missing some of the things that this rating uses, the formula is not as accurate apparently. And I'm not going to dive in. I didn't create a spreadsheet to talk about personal rating, but here's the formula. Here's how it's made up. And you can decide for yourself if you want to improve your personal rating, how to do that. I personally, folks, only care about one stat and one stat only. Then you can ask my clan because I get a little bitchy about it if it's not good. And that's my win rate. My win rate is the only thing that matters to me. It should be the only thing that matters to you. But you can decide to pursue these stats and all the glory that they seem to bestow on you and the people that try to use these things to bully others. But win rate is really what the game is about. It's about winning the match. It's about a team winning a game together. Yeah, I know, that's a shocker, right? Because most people don't even play together. They go out and they fight the other team kind of in their little cocoon, but they have other people around them. Well, stop thinking of the game that way. Start thinking about, this is my team, and yes, I have to deal with people that maybe aren't as good as me or that do silly stuff, but this is the team that I was dealt this match, and I'm going to do the best with it, and I'm going to be as good as I can in order to win the game for the team. I'm going to do what it takes to win the game. Sometimes that requires me doing a lot of damage and killing a lot of tanks. Sometimes that requires me hanging back, spotting people, picking apart where I can, helping support other tanks that are doing well. It's about seeing the bigger picture and not being focused on yourself. When you win more times than you lose, you actually have become at least average at this game. And as that win rate climbs into the upper 50s, into the 60s and beyond, then you are truly a better player than someone that doesn't have that win rate. Try to do the best you can do. Try to improve a little bit each day, each time you go out into battle. Watch videos, talk to people, grow your knowledge about the game. Never be afraid to listen to somebody, share what they know. Even if you think they don't have anything to offer, you might surprise yourself and actually learn something. The number one thing when you walk away from this video that I hope you take away from this video is don't let people bully you about stats. The only stat that matters is your win rate. And always be open to learning and getting better at World of Tanks. That makes a great community. That makes a collaborative community. And I think that's what we all really want to be a part of, is actually people working together to win the game. All right, guys, that's it for this video. But I really, really appreciate you sticking with me even through some of this sophisticated math and learning about WN8. And of course, let me know if you have any feedback or comments in the comments below. Hit that bell if you want to see when I post another video. Otherwise, good luck out there, folks, and we'll see you in the next one.